You guys today, DiJonai Carrington, after clotheslining Sophie Cunningham, running into the locker room, screaming, "That's white privilege!" Then tweeting 8/23, threatening Sophie Cunningham and the Indiana Fever. DiJonai Carrington now comes out and clarifies what she means when she says white privilege for the Indiana Fever.
So with 2 minutes left in the first quarter, DiJonai Carrington just slapped the dog shit out of Sophie Cunningham. Sophie pops up. She's obviously upset. DiJonai says, "Try me." And then look at Stephanie White. Look at her face. Look. It's mad shit. Now, number one, this is obviously a flagrant 2. It just is. By the letter of the law, you got to call a flagrant 2. We all know these referees.
That girl needs to be thrown out the league. She's not even a good enough player to be bringing this type of drama. She needs to...
Welcome back to the Mudassir Hassan channel. Today, I'm here with another exciting WNBA news update, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Music. Make sure you stay with me until the very end because I'll be breaking down the entire story while keeping you updated on everything that has happened. So, without wasting any time, let's get straight into the video. DiJonai Carrington apparently decided that the internet needed an explanation after being ejected from a game. Just 2 words from the locker room were enough to spark an entirely new controversy: white privilege. Days later, Carrington is still dealing with the fallout from that post. She has attempted to clarify her comments, walked back parts of what she originally said, and continued responding to people who disagree with her interpretation of the situation. What started as a short social media post has now developed into a much bigger and more complicated controversy. To be honest, this may be one of the most unusual responses we've seen from a WNBA player this season. Music. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 90% of viewers still haven't subscribed. It's completely free and only takes a second, but your support means a lot to us. So, have you subscribed already? Great. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Now, let's get back to the story.
Cunningham, otherwise known as MAGA Barbie in the WNBA, is a superstar player. She's one of the most famous female athletes in the world because she stood up for women in women's sports, saying only biological women should be allowed to play in the WNBA. And for that, she is literally risking her life. Check this out. This is what happened to Sophie Cunningham last night when she was clotheslined by a filthy, dirty player for Chicago who has a name that I can't pronounce, or maybe I just refuse to do that. That's my right as an American. But this is a player that has attacked Caitlin Clark, gouged her eye out, that has now bloodied the face of Sophie Cunningham, and as soon as she did this, she tweeted white privilege, meaning she's declaring this is a race crime. Now, if a white woman was doing this to black women, it'd be the #1 story in the world. She'd be banned from the league forever. But somehow black women are allowed to get away with this against white women. And it's white women in the league who make themselves a target by simply standing up for traditional values. And
Sophie Cunningham has been one of the most outspoken supporters of her Fever teammate Caitlin Clark throughout the season. She has repeatedly stated that she believes the league and its officials are not doing enough to protect Clark from the physical treatment she faces on a nightly basis. Cunningham has openly criticized specific players, and even suggested that some teams have discussed ways to teach Clark what the W truly is inside their locker rooms. Speaking that openly is not exactly the kind of thing that makes a player universally popular around the league. And Cunningham has never really tried to hide the fact that she understands the consequences of speaking her mind. She knows that standing up for Clark and calling attention to the physicality surrounding her can create enemies, but she has continued to make her position clear.
Goo! That's assault, brother. You can't do that. What the fuck? Is this just the default if you can't think? Or if you just like don't want to take accountability for your actions? Oh my god, this league, bro, this league. Bro. White privilege while you're wearing a bleach blonde dyed wig. I mean, the fuck? What is privileged about that? You Stone Cold Steve Austin clotheslined her ass. What about that is white privilege? The WNBA stays undefeated. It truly does. They can't get out of their own.
This background is important because it helps explain why so many people looked at this particular foul and felt there might have been more to it than simply a hard basketball play. Cunningham had already established herself as one of the players most willing to speak publicly about Caitlin Clark's treatment on the court and the physical challenges she faces during games. Now, Cunningham found herself at the center of another controversial moment after taking a forearm to the face that left her bleeding. Music. The optics of the situation were difficult to ignore, and many observers had already formed strong opinions by the time the ejection was announced. Whether Carrington intended any of the broader interpretations being attached to the incident remains a matter of debate. However, given the history surrounding Cunningham's outspoken support of Clark, it is easy to understand why so many fans and analysts immediately viewed the play through a much larger lens than a routine basketball foul.
Beyond concerning at this point how far from the plot we have actually gotten. And when I say the plot, I mean the basketball. How far from the game of basketball we have spiraled. When we're talking about the WNBA, you know, we used to joke, it's like, oh, 0 days without drama in the WNBA. This league is living up to it at a rate and a level of concern that we haven't ever had with all the discussion.
Craziness going on in the WNBA. DiJonai Carrington tweeted out white privilege from the locker room of a game that she was playing in. Get this, she fouled Sophie Cunningham hard. Sophie Cunningham, obviously a white person, fouls her hard. Flagrant 2, gets ejected, goes to the locker room and tweets out white privilege in the middle of the game. Now here's the kicker to me. A flagrant 2 has to be contact that can lead to an injury that looks excessive. DiJonai, it was about as excessive as possible. If there was any evidence of there being white privilege, this was not it. What the heck?
Cunningham is certainly not the only person who has noticed the growing tension surrounding Caitlin Clark. Earlier this year, when Clark was ranked only 9th among guards in a league-wide player poll, legendary broadcaster Dick Vitale publicly shared his reaction. He described the result as being driven by jealousy and suggested that, eventually, other players would recognize just how much Clark has contributed to the league financially. After the Carrington incident, those comments took on an unexpected significance. Once again, a player closely connected to Clark and Cunningham had been involved in a physical confrontation, while the reaction from those around the situation appeared divided. A former teammate seemed to celebrate the incident, while the head coach appeared to offer a measured defense of the player involved, rather than focusing entirely on the player who had been hurt. When similar situations continue to generate the same kind of reaction, it becomes increasingly difficult for fans and observers not to question whether Vitale's earlier assessment contains some truth. Whether that interpretation is fair remains debatable, but the pattern has certainly fueled another round of discussion about how Clark and those who support her are being treated around the league.
Across the face, coming down, trying to prevent the layup, but that is just a hard hit. That's definitely going to be upgraded, I think, to a flagrant 2, Ryan.
I think that is going to be a flagrant 2. There is
It was fucking deserved.
And just getting her out of the
Lucky
way.
it wasn't a right hook.
Make no mistake about it. Carrington targeted Cunningham. She targeted her because of her political stances. She targeted Cunningham because of the praises that she keeps receiving. She targeted her with a dirty shot that had absolutely nothing to do with basketball. And then after getting ejected, she runs to the locker room to play the fucking victim card. Like she didn't try to just take off Cunningham's head in 4K. Like we all didn't just watch it happen. That is not competition. That is a grown woman swinging on someone who she disagrees with and then screaming racism when she gets held accountable for it. DiJonai Carrington needs to be held responsible, and I'm not talking about just getting ejected.
Here's what happened on the court, because once you watch the play, the sequence itself is fairly straightforward. During a fast break, Sophie Cunningham was running down the court with a clear path toward what appeared to be an easy layup. Instead of simply contesting the shot, DiJonai Carrington came from behind and made contact with Cunningham's face and neck area with her forearm. Cunningham went down hard, while the ball still managed to go through the basket. At that point, however, the made shot became secondary because play was stopped and officials immediately focused on the contact. The referees reviewed the incident at the monitor and ultimately upgraded the foul to a flagrant 2, which under WNBA rules results in an automatic ejection. From the officials' perspective, the factors were difficult to overlook: the force of the contact, the point of impact, the follow-through, the potential risk of injury, and the fact that Cunningham was in a vulnerable position. Taken together, those elements provided the basis for the flagrant 2 decision. There was no longer much room for debate about the type of foul that had occurred.
Sophie Cunningham, where she proceeded to go into the locker room and tweet white privilege after being thrown out of the game. I'm not going to comment on that situation, but I will say this. This is a flagrant 2. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, don't matter. This is a flagrant. I mean, she clotheslined her. What more do you want? So, this looks very bad. It just shows that the WNBA is nowhere near where they need to be professionally. Because again, this is a clothesline. It's flagrant 2.
Cunningham got back to her feet almost immediately, visibly furious after the contact. She moved toward Carrington before teammates and officials quickly stepped in to separate the two players. The confrontation was brief, but Cunningham's reaction was clearly driven by the severity of what had just happened. It's also important to recognize that the league and its officials can evaluate a player's reaction differently depending on the circumstances. According to the account provided, the head of the officiating crew explained after the game that Cunningham was not disciplined for her response because it was considered understandable given the seriousness of the contact she had just experienced. In other words, the officials themselves appeared to acknowledge that the incident was serious enough to justify Cunningham's immediate emotional reaction. While players are generally expected to control their emotions, the circumstances surrounding the play were taken into consideration when evaluating what happened afterward.
The fact that she said white privilege, that is the story. The story isn't that she got kicked out. It's that she tweeted out white privilege as though because Sophie Cunningham is white, somehow that's why she got kicked out. They go on to defend her, the story, the narrative that she's not a dirty player. She makes plays like this all the time. I put together a little clip of DiJonai Carrington, who is definitely one of the dirtiest players in the WNBA. I don't know if we can roll it, but she's taken her long fingernails. She's scratched Caitlin Clark's eyes out. She's had multiple instances of chasing people down from behind, trying the same swat and smashing them in the head and causing mini fights. She pulled another girl's hair. I don't know if we'll get to that clip in a second when she's falling. Totally dirty play. This is not a skin color thing. She has a history of making dirty plays, and it's fine. The NBA, you can be a rough and tumble league. Now, where this thing gets absolutely bananas is when you start making it into a race and culture war, and the people talking about it are not mentioning 99% of the time that she went back and tweeted white privilege.
That is what makes Carrington's later comments so difficult for many people to understand. If the officials themselves determined that the contact was excessive and unnecessary, and also considered Cunningham's reaction understandable after being struck in the face, it raises an obvious question. Where does race factor into the discussion? Regardless of which player committed the foul or which player received it, the situation was evaluated according to the same on-court standard. A player was struck in the head and neck area while attempting to complete a shot, and the officials reviewed the play before upgrading the foul. The key point is that the rule applies to every player in the league. Once officials determined that the contact met the criteria for a flagrant 2, the consequences were the same regardless of the identities of the players involved. The decision was based on the nature of the play itself, not on who committed the foul or who received it.